And really, it doesn't bother me when people practice their faith. It's only when the practice of your faith negatively impacts someone else. That's where my problem starts.
So he's trying to live 100% for God. He said it. So we wake up in the morning, we're freshly up, we're slept good through the night, and I'm going to live 100. I'm going to give God 100%. He said we walk by the TV and Baywatch is on, and suddenly that 100% goes down to 75% because there's boobies on the screen and I'm looking,
Exactly.
and so and then you stump your toe and you're like, son of a bitch, and now you're down to 50%. And the way he approached that was Jesus makes up that other 50%, so that you don't have to give 100%. Jesus is supposed to make up that part. And it's funny because I will tell that story and I'm like, look, I'm not trying to preach at you, but the way I look at our team is that one day this person's going to come in and not be able to give 100%. Maybe they can only give 75%. And it's my job. It's your job as a team member to make up that other 75, because who knows what they're going through at church or at home or church, who knows what kind of shit they're going through at home, and they come to work. Why am I going to shit on them when they're already going through shit? Let's try to help them get through whatever problem they're getting through, even if that's just, let's support them at work. Maybe you don't even like the guy or girl, but let's try to give them and so I didn't, it's not about Christianity. To me, that's the perfect example of what I'm supposed to be as a human. That's kind of how I look at the Bible now. I read it in certain ways that it's like, how can I've told Mason, I feel like I'm more of a Christian now than I ever have been, not because I believe in Christianity necessarily, but because those examples of how can I make the people that I'm in communication with, how can I make their life less suck?
Right.
How can I make the people that report to me at work, they spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week with me. If I'm a fucking asshole, what kind of life am I making for them? I've got to be that guy that as a manager, I'm trying to protect my people and lift them up. And I try to do that in everywhere with everything, it's trying to, and here's the thing. I'm okay saying I'm doing that shit. That's me. That's not God doing it. This entity that exists outside of time and space and blah, 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 whatever. That's me actually performing what everybody's supposed to do, including Christians, without actually, doing it. So, anyway, that's when I start preaching. That's me preaching right there. That's the way I preach these days. It's kind of like, I'm done with all the stupid shit. Okay. So my brother's got power issues at his house.
Oh no.
So, may just be me and you for the duration. But anyway, so, it's kind of like, I try to take the things that I learned in a traumatic environment, that what is the good that I can bring out of that? And I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't the shit that I went through.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, yes, it was shit, and I'm going to shit on it every time I get a chance. I'm going to call people out for what they did and did not do, or what they should have done. But at the same time, they were doing what they, like you said, the slavery thing that was common back then. And so the environment we grew up in, that's whether or not they meant to, it was traumatic. Yeah. But at the same time, I kind of feel compassion for those people, because what kind of shit did they go through before they started that made them act the way they act? And I may believe one way, whether it's politics, whether it's church, whether it's spirituality, whether it's whatever, I've went through the shit that I've went through. And I told my wife last night, and I think I've said it on the podcast, I try to be the person that I needed in my life during the time that I was going through shit. And to me, that's more godly than, hey, Robert, you know what? You're going to hell. Just because you need to shave a little bit, buddy. Just saying, Exactly. I mean, I literally got called into the office because I went straight from work to church, to a funeral, no less, or a memorial, a wake. And because my beard grows really fast,
Yeah.
And so I could shave in the morning time, but by the time by the time I'm off work, I've got a 5 o'clock shadow.
Yeah.
That's hence the 5 o'clock fucking shadow. I mean,
Right.
it's in the fucking name, assholes. And so, I literally got called in the office because I did not stop and shave before I went to the memorial. And I'm like, I didn't have time. I worked an hour and a half from church. It took me an hour and a half to get here. I didn't leave till 5. The thing closed up at 7. You wanted me to be here. Well, I'm here.
Right.
If you don't like the way I fucking showed up, that's your problem, not mine. And that was towards the end where I was like, you know what? Fuck this shit. I don't have time for your stuff. Yeah. I love these people. And if my beard offends them, then maybe I don't need to be around them. That's right. Your problem, not mine. I'm done.
Yeah.
You know, anyway, you get me on my high horse on that shit. And
yeah. I mean, and there are things that were good as part of the experience, you know, as part of growing up, and there's truths in the Bible. And I think the fundamentalist atheists try to cast it as if there's nothing good in it. Well, no.
Yes.
It's the best of human morals and knowledge at that time, you know, and humans figured stuff out.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
throughout all cultures,
what's the point if I'm not progressing, if I'm not evolving to a better version of exactly. Whatever, you know? And it's speaking of fundamentalism. Go ahead.
I don't have a problem when people talk about, you know, casting something as divine, you know, when it becomes uncommon, you know, it doesn't bother me. Only when the practice of your faith negatively impacts someone else. That's where my problem starts.
Yeah.
You know, because if your religion is not making you a better person, then really, what good is it?
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean,
if it is,
you know,
then go for it.
I mean, the shit that happened to me, there's absolutely no way that I can clearly articulate it and prove it because it fucking happened to me. You know, and I've got to talk about fundamentalist atheist. I've got a guy. I know a guy right now that I don't communicate with him very often because he was a stringent UPC preacher. You know what? Now he's a stringent atheist preacher. So he didn't change his personality or the way he engages. He just changed his belief system. And I'm going to whatever hell he thinks I, you know, exist or you know, not, you know, because I'm not going to do that. You know, that even when I was atheist, I was always like, you know what? I don't care if you believe it. As long as you're not hurting me or hurting other people, you know, I got no problem. By the time you decide to show up, asshole, just kind of decided. And he left. You offended him. But, you know, I mean, and I could go on and on. I mean, it's kind of, you know, I can't define any of this stuff. I just, like you said, I'm believing what I believe. I don't know that I necessarily care that you don't believe me, and not you. I'm just talking generally.
Yeah.
And so, I hear myself somewhere. Anyway, oh yeah, I see how it is. So you left, then you came back.
He showed up to troll you.
Yeah. Anyway, you know, I mean, that's the way I look at it. I mean, how can I not be a good human being and not allow people to take their own paths? You know, one of the things I do believe, and can't prove it, don't know if I, you know, but I do believe that the things that are in front of us are there for a purpose. And I think we go through things that we need to go through at times in order to get us to a certain location as individuals. Now, does that mean all the bad shit is God? No. Likely I made a decision at some point, or maybe my parents made a decision at some point that has come back to bite me in the fucking ass. And you know what? That's okay. I used to be filled with anxiety and depression and all this shit. You know, I was, you know, all this stuff. And now I'm like, you know what? What can I learn from this experience?
Right.
Good or bad? I don't give a shit.
Right. I think probably, you know, as far as labels go, I probably lean harder into the whole idea of apatheism. And it's kind of, there's some agnosticism in there maybe. And it's the idea that a God may exist, And if so, if they have the power and they have the will and the desire, they'll make themselves known to me. But all I can examine are the gods that I've known and the gods that have been postulated. And of those that I've looked into, they haven't met the standard of evidence. And, so for me, I can't accept that. Some other people might pursue it and, find meaning in that. And again, if it's adding to your life, man, more power to you.
Yeah,
we should be able to get along even if we don't agree. But interesting. I mentioned going through that accelerated resolution therapy, and after it happened, I went to and started watching, purposely seeking out those videos of Pentecostal speaking in tongues to test whether that traumatic bond was still there. And I found out that it just kind of faded away. But I haven't talked about the experience much. I have it written down in a document. So I'll give you the exclusive scoop. It happened when I was 11 years old. It was, a year after I first spoke in tongues. This evangelist came and preached a revival. And he preached a couple of messages I heard one time in my life when I was 11 years old. I could shave my beard, trim my hair, go into a Pentecostal pulpit and preach it and have people in the altar Sunday. That's how vividly I remember how this was crafted. But he liked to tell a lot of demonic possession stories and stories of things that happened to people who didn't come to the altar that night. They fell away from the faith, and of course, tragedy awaits. Might be 20 years down the road, but it's usually 6 months. You die in that fiery car crash or whatever. So here I was 11 years old, and every single night I was completely convicted, and I was in the altar just, bawling my eyes out, body just clenched up, every muscle clenched, because I was sure I was one step away from hell. Although 24 hours before that, I had spoken in tongues until I was hoarse. Here I was doing it again. And I did it for night after night after night for the entire revival. And then, a couple of things that I remember in addition to that were after service, after I just completely poured my 11-year-old self out on the altar and was fully exhausted, covered in sweat. I noticed that the pastor of my church, who, again, we were called to look up to as this, ultimate authority. After church, the only thing he was concerned about was getting the evangelist back to his office, cutting him his check, and then going out to eat. And it's like, there was this weird disconnect between, man, I just went through this intense experience, and I'm still high from it. Because like I said, when you have that, it's my estimation of speaking in tongues. The way I did it was, you push and you push and you push, and you force yourself through this narrow opening until you literally have a psychological break. And then when I speak in tongues, I literally was not in control. I think some people do the whole, sold my Honda, shit about a Yamaha. Yeah. Some people do that, and I said they navigate their way through it. But for me, it was like, I can't do that because God knows. And so I would literally have a psychological break, and I would lose control, and I would have a transcendent experience. I would be in heaven, seeing visions of things and completely, not present. I'd be laying back in somebody's arms out of it, just off in some other place, but I was deep inside my mind somewhere. And it was in a sense diabolical because, we talked about original sin. And it's not so much the people perpetuate it, but it's the system that says, we're going to teach you how to punish yourself. And then we don't have to do it as much. When you think that, the whole idea of repenting and, walk past the TV and you see, and then you're convicted by that, that's guilt you're associating, you're putting on yourself. So, I had that going on, here at 11 years old, and it was extreme mental duress. And then, the revival ended and went on. But, and so when I would see videos of kids having that same experience, and I think there's a difference between the performative aspect of speaking in tongues and people who are experiencing it the way I did. And, especially when you've seen the ones that seem to be UPC, it's their experience and their expressions seem to be a lot closer to what I remember experiencing. But I kept having this really traumatic experience feelings and emotions every time that came up. And I would just get really agitated and bothered. And so when I went through the accelerated resolution therapy, my therapist made me walk through that scenario where she was doing this script. And, the first time it was, you got to relive it. And then the second time we went through, notice something else about the scene that you might not have, normally think about. And so she slowly put me right back in that situation. And then she got to the point to where she said, this time you get to change something. And, she said, it's up to you. You can change the outcome any way you want. And it's not something that I consciously made a decision of doing because, like I said, she was doing her little movements and had my brain. But I visualized me as a 48-year-old man walking in the back of that church down to the altar and putting my arm around my 11-year-old self and saying, you don't have to do this shit. And I walked myself out the back, my 11-year-old self out the back of the church door and said, never again. And I was being that person that I didn't have, because everyone in my life, that was normal and accepted in the way things were supposed to be. And, I realized, there was no one there to give me that permission when I was 11 years old. But now I can do it to myself, and I don't have to subject my own children to that. I don't have to subject anyone. And, if the time comes and I meet someone who's struggling, I can say, hey, man, here's my experience. And, here's why you don't have to. If it's something that is causing you to have anxieties, and, you don't have to hold on to that. And it was extremely powerful. And like I said, over the next few weeks, so many things that were connected to that same trauma in my life just started. It's like somebody was cutting chains and the bodies were floating to the surface, Yeah. And I was just like, oh, I guess I got to deal with this stuff. And, so I just kind of took it as it came. And it's like, man, I don't know if it's ever going to end, if these issues are ever going to stop popping up, but I just kind of worked through it. And, eventually it faded until, I can talk about it now. And, I can see those videos, and I instead of having a reaction of anxiety, I have more reaction of pity, that there are people who that's all they know and they think it's normal. And, I guess hopefully before they get to my age, they'll find themselves in a way that, in a situation where they can deal with the trauma that's being inflicted on them as well.
Yeah.
So
no, I get that. And I can see, it's in you. I can see it's, I kind of went through the same thing where you break down and you realize, you know what, I'm not a bad guy, and,
yeah.
And even, even today, it's hard for me to say that to an extent because you're so beat the shit up, and so, I'm really not a bad guy. It's like, I don't particularly like being around a whole lot of people. That's just, if I had to guess, I'm probably introverted, but my dad was a pastor. So I was forced to go talk to the new people every time, and we started a church in a, I don't know if you know where Giddings, Texas is. We started the church in Giddings. And so, I was the only Pentecostal in my school. Literally, that's not a joke. And so, you're forced to go shake hands with adults who are new and do these things. I was forced to go sell peanut brittle. That's kind of
lots of peanut brittle.
And so you learn. I learned how to put a mask on, to where, oh God, here we go with this shit again. Let me act like I'm not me, so that I can make it through whatever this fucking shit is. And so there's a point where, like, through therapy and I think some of my shit started even before, because, there's a point where, like, I had gotten to where, like, none of it is real. Fuck all of it. And I may have been a little bit of that fundamentalist, fuck you. But it was anger.
Yeah.
And that's not helpful to anybody, even if you are atheist or not. Anger is never helpful. And so I went through this shit, and, I told Adam, I'm more of converted now than I was anytime I ever went to any kind of fucking church. Adam is my brother. He goes by Mason on the podcast, just so everybody knows. If I say Adam, it's my brother. That's what I know him as. It's and not that I'm Christian or whatever, but when you start understanding that, you know what, we are naturally probably good people.
Yeah.
That's the natural version of us. And then we're taught how to hate other people, whether it's race, whether it's religion, whether it's politics. Those are taught things.
Right.
Yeah. And so, there's something to be said. Like I probably the first 6 months, every time I talked to my therapist, and I would go every week when I first started. Because I was, I really needed help. I almost didn't make it through. If I knew there was a point where I was hit bottom, and I needed somebody, because I literally don't know if I would be here today if it weren't for therapy. And so, one of the things I harp on, maybe not on the podcast so much, but anybody that comes to talk to me, bro, you need, or sis, whatever the case may be, you need to go get a therapist. I mean, you just because you're a man doesn't mean that you got to be an alpha male, and you can still be whatever that is, and go to fucking therapy, because it just makes you a better person. It makes you a more healed person. And when you're healed, you automatically want to help other people heal, however that happens. For me, I try to be the most kind I can be to the people that I feel needed. And it's, and it's funny because, I don't proclaim Christianity or any kind of anything other than just I am who I am. But it's funny, I find myself talking to people, and if I had to put a Christian vernacular to it, it's almost like I say things that come from within, and a month later somebody's like, you said this to me the other day, and that really helped me. And it's not, it's not that it's God or it's some sort of anointing or any of this. It's just, bro, I'm just loving people.
Yeah. And
try not to be a fucking asshole. I mean, I told people that my religion is D-bad. Don't be a dick. Just don't be a dick. I mean,
I think it was a children's author had a quote. I can't think of what her name was, but it said pretty much, if you have a choice between being right or being kind, always choose be kind.
Yeah. Because, I mean, what is right? It really doesn't mean a whole lot if you're hurting other people.
Yeah. Exactly.
You're just not you're not doing any good. And so, I'm glad you were willing to go talk about that stuff through this, because one of the things I want the podcast to do is our words, we put it out there, they're going to be out there forever unless, something shit hits the fan or some kind of shit like that. And so, who knows that 10 years down the road, some kid doesn't come across something I've said or something you said or something Mason said and says, that changed my life. And I may never know that, and I'm not chasing this for that.
Right.
I'm not going to be the preacher that says, well, I had 24 people pray through the other day. And so therefore you should make me come to your church and pay me to save 24 people at your church. Exactly. It's a sales tactic.
Preach that same sermon.
Yeah, exactly. I've heard the same guy preach the same sermon 20 times. It's just like, and then they get it down really well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's definitely a performative aspect to good evangelists within the movement.
And I appreciate it to an extent. I mean, I appreciate the, even today I can listen to someone speak and really appreciate their ability to articulate something that I'm like, man, that was really, really good. Even if I don't agree with it,
right?
The beauty of their language is, I mean, that's part of it. And I don't spend any time with Christians per se, unless it's just happenstance.
Right.
But, it's not a Christian thing per se. It's just people trying to talk and,
right.
just speak what it is, and the people who need to hear it will hear it, and the people who don't matter.
Right.
Or maybe they do matter. They just, I'll give an example. As a manager, I had someone who reported to me who was in a leadership position, and they and I did not agree on how to lead. They were more strict and wanted more structure, and I'm very much allow people to do what they need to do, as long as the job gets done by the end of the day. That's the kind of way. And this person actually went to a different department. They left my department because the two of us could not agree that I was not as much of an asshole as I needed to be. And I'm not changing. First off, I'm 50, and change is not going to happen very easily. Right. And I told this person, I'm like, look, you're going to do awesome things in the future because they're young. And I said, I hope to see you grow into a great leader. I said, and maybe I'm not the person who guides you into that leadership because I'm just not the guy. And that's okay. You don't have to come be like me. Go find someone that you want to be like and try to be like them. That's fine with me. I'm not mad at you for leaving. And not that I'm anybody except for I try to treat people generally like that. I may not be the guy that you want to be around, and that's okay. I'm not going to be hurt by that or offended by that. It's just we don't click, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You're not for everyone.
No.
And you got to be okay with that. So,
yeah.
That's one of the reasons I was excited to come on this podcast, because I've listened to a lot of life after faith style podcasts of people who have deconverted or deconstructed, but I haven't heard a lot of voices talk about coming out of Oneness Pentecost. Very few. So, and I think there's probably a lot more people like us than we realize. Who stuck in it, that are doubting their faith, and again, they don't have the permission. They don't give themselves permission to question or to doubt, and there's, because of that strong fear base, it's always hanging over your head. So I hope that it helps people to realize that hey, if you see cracks in the facade, then you don't have to keep pasting over them with wallpaper paste and pretending they're not there.
Yeah, and I'm also not going to be the guy that says, hey, I'm the one you need to listen to.
Yeah, right.
Let's take some of this shit literal. Let's take that.
Yeah.
Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, and sometimes that saves you out of the shit you're in right now. And right. I just, you like you said, I feel compassion for some of these people who are. I think it's probably the people that don't need to be in that religion that tend to be, and you're in my situation and Mason's situation where, it's traumatic, and some of that has to do with, probably not to insult anybody that goes there, but I'm just not okay with, because I said that right. As a child that never worked for me. You're gonna have to explain that, and then make sense why you believe one thing and it contradicts the other thing you believe. I think I've said it on here before. I could not go to the theater and watch The Bourne Identity, but I could read the fuck out of the book, and the book was a little bit more non-Christian than the movie was. And right. So how can you justify those things? You're still taking in media, whether it's words or video, and so, if I were to say to anybody listening that's in that situation, always embrace the question.
Yeah.
Always. And don't take my word for it, or Robert's word for it, or Mason's word for it, or anybody's word for it. Try to figure that shit out on your own. And you know what? If you stay where you are because you're comfortable being there and you've worked your way through that, by all means do so. But don't feel like you're bound to that. That's one of the things I think that's helped me, being that atheist. And I don't even know if I want to claim that at this point. Claim it. You can see that there's that Pentecostal shit coming out. I don't know if I want to own that shit or not.
Right.
But there's a point where you've got to work work out your own salvation, find your path. And
Right.
I think what atheism did for me is allowed me to just say, I'm done with it all. I literally deconstructed anything that I could pertaining to UPC stuff. And but by doing that, I don't have this boundary that says it's got to fit in this specific box.
Right.
You know, I may not be an atheist now, but I'm not mad at people who are,
Yeah.
because that's their path, that's their journey, that's their that's the path before them, and yeah, you're right. I mean, there's probably a lot more people like you and I than we realize. And I think some of the reason why you don't hear voices talking about it probably is there's some fear to an extent of rejection of family. I mean, my entire family is UPC.
Shunning it's a very harsh thing to have to undergo.
Yeah. I mean, when I just started questioning UPC, and this was 20 years ago, it was when I was 30, I went through the shunning. I think 99.9% of the people that I thought were my good friends, all of a sudden wouldn't talk to me. And I didn't change anything. I mean, I still shaved. I still, I didn't change a whole lot till I got, a couple more years after that. But man, that effort to keep you in a place that makes me comfortable. I'm going to make you stay in a place that makes me feel better about what I am,
And that's, one thing I've been fortunate. My family, they're still hardcore. I still go to the same church they raised me in, but they've never shunned me or, I'm fortunate because I know some families who have done that to their kids in that church. But yeah, my family has enough humanity, to where they realize what's important, that relationships are worth cultivating. But I guess, one of the arguments or gripes I have against Christianity as a whole, and it even gets honed in more with Pentecost, and I think it's a benefit for people who identify themselves as non-believers of any type or even deconstructed, is this idea, you talk about original sin and the guilt, but it's like all you have to do is take it to Jesus and repent, and then everything's okay. But if you've done something that impacted someone else, there's usually no requirement for you to go make it right with that person, even though Jesus has a parable about that. There's direct teaching saying, if you bring your gift to the altar and remember your brother has an ought against you, go first make it right with your brother, and then God will accept your offering. I mean, it's right there. But
verbatim.
Yeah, verbatim. But it's more this thing of all you got to do is make it right between you and God, and then everything else is just supposed to wash out somehow. But as a non-believer, you don't have that. You don't have that little caveat. And so, I think, as a human, I'm capable of doing amazingly great things and horrible, harmful things. Sometimes I can do them simultaneously or at the same time even. But I don't have that safety cushion, that safety net. So the buck stops with me. And so when I screw up, I got to make it right.
Yeah.
And again, I don't, due to my current position, I don't think that I have offenses against God per se, but when I have situations in my relationships and where I screw up, then hey, it's on me to get it fixed.
Yeah. Well, I case in point, I had someone who I work with, and she and I had become really good friends because when I was going through my shit, I really withdrew from people. Like I don't know if you're like that, but when I'm going through shit, I'm really much internalized that because I've got to figure it out. Well, this person, she was with me through all that. I mean, she would come sit. She's a coworker, and so she would come sit, and she's my peer, so she's the same level as I am. And she would come sit with me, and I'm not a crier. I don't know if you're like that. I've never been. I don't tear up. Man, I was going through my shit. It wasn't a good day unless I didn't cry like 4 or 5 times. I mean, I was really, going through, working through shit, and like I hated it. I I hated it, because I'm not going to cry. I determined when I was a kid, you're not going to make me cry. I'm not going to do it. And man, I for about 6 months, man, seriously, it wasn't. I actually went and bought Kleenex for my desk.
Yeah.
I have never bought Kleenex in my life, and I would go buy boxes of Kleenex because for some reason I would just bust out crying. And I think it's because I was working through the trauma, working through that stuff. Well, this friend of mine, she would come sit with me, you know, and I'd be crying like a baby. And she's not a crier either, and she doesn't like emotion and all this stuff. And so she was with me through all this stuff. Well, last year I was not where I needed to be mentally, and no excuses. I was what I was. She and I didn't really get into it, but it was kind of like I was very much probably over aggressive in my engagement with her. And I'll be the first one to say I probably should have handled that situation a lot better. But because of that, even though I went to her multiple times and said, look, I'm so sorry for that. I was wrong. That should have never happened. We still are not the same, even today, and so I've tried to make it right. We get along really well now, but it's not like it was before. There's not that closeness that I had before. And I regret that, but I've done all I can do to resolve it. But you're right. Had I been in a church setting, I'd have been like, oh, well, I just don't care.
Right. Yeah.
Because, God's got my back, whatever the case may be.
Have our own thing going.
Yeah. Or I can go to a restaurant and after service and, tell that waiter he's being an asshole without cussing,
Yeah.
And then go to preach, go preach the next night because I'm going to a revival. Yeah. And never have to actually go back and face the shit that I put in that guy's life or girl or whomever it is. And so you're right. I mean, I am more cognizant now of my attitude and the way I treat people than I ever have been before. And I just don't think this is judgmental, but I don't know that you can call yourself a Christian and be like that.
Yeah.
I just don't think you can. I can't reconcile it.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think there's a lot of maybe not contradictory, but strange and difficult teachings that Jesus made. But there's also a lot of them centered around how you treat one another, and it seems like those just kind of get swept under the rug or put on the back burner so many times, and because it's hard, but the thing is, Jesus even said it was hard in his teachings.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, because it's being a human it's a chore.
Yeah. Well, I can't quote it verbatim, but I mean, he said something to the effect is, wide is the path and easy, and then narrow is the right one. Yeah. And how easy is it to just repent? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Repent, be baptized in the name of Jesus for the remission of sins, and you shall receive the gift of the Holy Ghost. Oh, and by the way, it's got to be about the evidence of speaking in tongues. And so, how easy is that? Where I don't have any repercussions from my actions. I don't have any. I don't have to deal with the shit that I bring to people because God's got my back. He forgives me, and if He forgives me, then goddamn, you should forgive me as well. Yeah. And if you don't, then that's on you. And
that's between you and God now.
Yeah.
You take yourself out of the equation of a situation where you caused harm with someone. Just take yourself out and put God in your place and say, now your issue's with God.
Yeah.
So, I remember many times walking away from an altar, after speaking in tongues, and the thought was in my head, I'm good to go now. I'm good.
Yeah.
I've hit the goal and I'm all right.
it just makes
Then
it
you go
so.
do horrible things. You go be rude to the waiter and not leave a tip. Or,
Yeah, because and they're probably not Pentecostal, which makes it easier for me to do.
exactly. Yep.
Because they're going to hell anyway. So
Yep.
what the fuck,
Exactly.
Well, Robert, I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
My brother texted me. He gave up the ghost. He gave it up. His power went down. I don't even think he tried his hotspot, and I think that's the reason why we were seeing him do stuff. So he had to bail on us. Trust me, I will make plenty of fun of him.
Lots of
fun.
episodes, huh?
And by the way, thank you for the T-shirt thing. I'm in the process of making some. I was hoping to have them done by the time we had this podcast, so I could be like, "Hey, see what you did," But I appreciate it. I'm going to have T-shirts made, so I'll let you know when I have them on here.
Do that.
For the listeners, how can they? I mean, I assume that you do graphic design for everybody, or is it just for? Do you have a business?
I do have a freelance business. Yes. Best way to contact me. My business email is intjdesigner@gmail.com.
I think that's what I am. INTJ.
INTJ. Yep.
Yeah, I know what that is.
Introverts unite separately in your own homes.
Yeah, exactly. Through Zoom, so you don't have to deal with nobody.
That's right. So yeah, that's where I do most of my business through. But as far as my interactions with religion, I do it through Sacred Cow Diner. That's pretty much my handle everywhere. I have a YouTube channel with like 2 videos up so far. Not been very diligent on getting content uploaded. I do a lot of conversations on Twitter, for better or worse.
Twitter's a.
At the end of every day, I question: should I still be on this site?
Yeah. Twitter. I'm like that with Twitter too. Like I get on there and I end up getting in a bad mood. So
love-hate relationship for sure.
Yeah.
So.
Keep me updated. Are you writing a book? Is that what you're doing? Are you going to put all your experiences into a book?
Tentatively, yeah. I've started doing it kind of as a way to process through therapy, and I started out writing. My very first experience was speaking in tongues, and I was trying to convey it in a way that fully captured all the emotions and all of the intensity that I experienced. And so I outlined this entire thing. It's about a page long, I think. About a page long. And then at the end, it said, I give the date and said I was 10 years old. And so, you've just read this completely traumatic of someone pressing through into this, altered state, and then realize, oh, you were a kid when you did that.
Yeah.
So I started with that, and then I've kind of, again, started trying to just write the general history. There's a story I told here, but then there are so many little rabbit trails and sidetracks of, when I start doing it, I hit one of those trauma things surfaces. It's like, ooh, here's a memory you forgot you had.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to, eventually get it in some form. I'm not sure, how I'm going to distribute it or what. Maybe I'll put it on a blog or something so people can.
Well, when you get that, or when you're ready to let that go and be public, let us know, and we'll attach that to the show notes of this, and maybe we bring you back on at that time and we have further conversations. I mean, I've enjoyed the conversation generally.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think they're probably more like us than we realize. I think too, and like you said, I wrote. I'm not a writer generally. I mean, I can write well, but I'm not a journal guy. But I've written 2 or 3 notebooks full of just in the last few years of the shit that's come out, and so that's a good way to do it, And so, but I really appreciate you coming on. It's been good, and by the way, you do have a sweet spirit, and that kind of. Yeah, that's just the only way. No, I know how to explain it from back in the day, but and like I said, I felt that way about you back then. I always felt like even if you and I disagreed, I could always reach out if I needed, and then I didn't have a problem with that. So, just keep that in mind, man. I mean, don't beat yourself up about it. Just be who you are, bro. I mean, that's you're an awesome guy, and so thanks for coming on and I think that's it, man. If you don't have anything else to say.
Yes, I appreciate it. I'll use that to temper my inner asshole.
Hey, sometimes being an asshole is okay.
Yeah, and you have to give your permission to do it.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's appropriate, I think. So.
yeah, yeah.